Own it, baby. Oh, yes, that's right. You got to own it. And you know what? That's the way that you go through life, right? I got a question for you today on this Thursday. Are you a dreamer or are you kind of like a doer? It's okay to dream, but if you're not doing what you're dreaming about, then where are you getting? My guest today has been through a lot. He is a big dreamer, but he's also quite a doer. He is an author of 40 books. I wrote one, okay? 40 books. He's a speaker. He's a TEDx speaker. He's also a special ed teacher. And he is a wrestler. And boy, does this guy have a story. He is Dan Blanchard, and he is now the president of the NSA Connecticut chapter. Welcome, Dan. Thanks for being with me today.
Oh, happy to be here, Pat.
Yeah, listen, this is so cool that you're on here today because I think at every point in someone's life, right, we all have dreams. We all want to do something, but we might be stuck. We might be like, I don't know what the first step is to make that happen. Or I know what the first step is to make that happen, but I'm just fearful of doing that. So, Dan, you have an incredible story. You were born both deaf and mute, yet you have overcome that to achieve so much. I want to start out from the very beginning. Tell me your early days and that early story.
Great. And thank you for that great introduction. Yeah, I was born deaf and mute, and my parents didn't realize it. I had my father was a former Marine, a hard drinking, hard hitting, former Marine. And, I was born in the north end of Hartford into poverty, into like a very dysfunctional, violent home, neighborhood, all that. And my older brother, my father was always beating on him since he was really little because he wouldn't listen. But then at some point, somebody said, well, maybe he can't hear so well. So got his ears tested and they found out that he couldn't hear so well and that he needed an operation. And then they just naturally said, well, what about the little one? Which was me. And they were like, oh, no, he's just mentally retarded. That's his problem. He's just mentally retarded and he makes all these like animal noises. So they checked my ears. And they came back to my mom and said, we got good news, we got bad news. The good news is we can do an operation to restore his hearing. The bad news is since he missed like the milestones of speaking, he'll never talk. He'll do nothing but make animal noises the rest of his life. And my mom and my grandma, I don't know where my father was. He was probably off drinking. But my mom and my grandma, somehow they found this little old nun somewhere. And the three of them like refused to believe that I couldn't learn to talk. And I did. It's just amazing. A miracle that I learned to talk and don't make animal noises today.
I cannot even believe it. How old were you when you learned? Were you too young to really remember that? Or how old were you when you learned to speak and you could hear?
I do remember getting in some big old beat up car a few times a week and driving to see a nun. And outside of that, I have very, very little else I can remember. My mom shared the story with me a couple times when I was like a teenager. She's passed a bunch of years ago, so I can't really pick her mind about it. And my grandma's gone, my dad's gone. So there's really almost nobody really to talk to about it. But I do remember when I was a teenager, she told me this story a couple times. Along with a whole bunch of others, obviously. But but to this day, it's just like, wow. What if my mom and grandma and that nun didn't believe in me?
And what if they just said like, oh, okay. Because back in the day, and truth be told, my great uncle and great aunt were both born deaf. So this story really hit home for me because I know how difficult it was for that generation to actually get anywhere. You were kind of put away and not to be seen or heard. And I just love that your mother and your grandmother said, no, we're not going to accept this as an answer. Now, you also had an ear operation, right?
Yes. I had an ear operation that restored my hearing. But to this day, I don't know if it's a special ed thing or a hearing thing, but sometimes I just don't hear people, or sometimes I see their lips moving and I hear noise. But maybe I have like this auditory processing disorder, which I was never diagnosed. I never knew a thing about it until I became a special ed teacher and started realizing that some of my students had this auditory processing disorder that you hear the noise, it's coming at you, but it's just not registering. And it annoys the heck out of my wife. When my wife, I'll say, and she'll repeat it, and I'll look at it, and I'll say, what? And as she starts to repeat it, I'll go, the orange one, give me the orange one. Because as the third time it's starting to register, and then she gets mad. She goes, what? You heard it. And I'm like, honey.
Yeah, yeah.
So
You know what? And it's like, I mean, but if someone I appreciate knowing that about you now, and it's so important to sort of tell your story, and that's why I'm so glad that you're here today. And Jill Fletcher says, "Yeah, it was a miracle for sure." She commented, and you're right, Jill. Total miracle. But miracles happen when you take steps, when you take action, and when you have dreams and you get closer to your dreams. So I want to continue on with your story. So you learned to hear, you started speaking, you weren't just making animal noises. And when you were in high school, there was a pivotal moment where not much was going well for you, right? But you saw the opportunity to get involved with wrestling. Tell me about that.
Well, this is a sad story, but it's a story of hope, especially for all of the children I've worked with in bad situations. Um, Me and my brother, we had a burning desire to save our family from my father. He was coming home and beating on the family on a nightly basis. The cops were at our house 3 nights a week, sometimes 3 times a night. And the
Oh,
cops never did anything those days except for walk in, say, hey, is everything okay? My dad say, yeah, it's fine. They'd say, well, why is your wife all black and blue? He'd say, well, she bruises easily. Well, what about your boys? Your boys are black and, well, they bruise easily too. The cops would say, well, is everything all right? My father would say, yep, everything's fine. The cops would leave. Nobody was ever held accountable. So me and my brother, we got this weight set, and we hit the weights as hard as we could every single day. We learned to wrestle. We joined the wrestling team, the football team. We joined all these things with basically one sad goal, was to protect our family from our father. And we were just little boys trying to take this on. And when I got to high school, everybody was just like, wow, you're such a natural. You're strong, you're fast, you can fight, you can wrestle, you can hit on the football field. And it was just like, yeah, because I have to. I have to save my family.
mm.
So it was really, really sad. But I worked very, very, very hard with a fire in my belly. And it's a sad story. But at the same time, if you're in a dire situation and let's say life has been so unfair to you and you're angry as heck, you can funnel that anger into good, into bettering yourself. And that's what I did.
Well, I give you and your brother a lot of credit, but you funneled that energy into actually being quite successful as a wrestler. Tell me about that.
Yeah, like I said, I was the first, well, this is funny. 8th grade, the first wrestling tournament I ever entered, I took first place. Freshman year, I beat the returning varsity wrestler and made varsity as a freshman, and placed in the States as a freshman. Sophomore year, same thing. Junior year, state champ, junior Olympian. Senior year, same thing, state champ, junior Olympian.
You're
Broke
Olympian. Wow, wait a minute. That's a big accomplishment.
yeah, broke all sorts of records, was recruited all over the place by colleges. Just had a super, super successful career. And on top of that, also won a state championship in high school football. And was a major player on the team. So, I mean, my people look at my high school years and just say, well, I was like in the newspaper like every weekend, and it was like glory days for sure. You know what I'm saying?
Did
But
people know your story though, Dan? Did people know that the way that you were born?
no, a lot of my friends found out when I wrote my memoir, A Fighting Chance, and a bunch of them have called me over the last year or two, and they've been like, Dan, I had no idea this was going on. And, I got voted most optimistic senior year in superlatives, right? They're like, we had no idea this was going on. But a lot of people reached out and shared with me, this was going on in my house too. And
Oh,
I could never tell anybody. So thank you for writing that book. Now I know I wasn't alone.
and you know what? And that is the power of a story. And that is why, everybody has their own story. And getting it out there is so liberating, but you also help others along the way, which I love about you. So let me ask you about how do you now you're a special ed teacher, right? So fast forward. you're a special ed teacher, you're a speaker. I'm sure when you talk to your kids, like, what do you tell them about, if they're afraid, how to go forward, how to move forward?
Mm. Well, I really believe, I mean, at the beginning of the show, you talked about dreaming and doing, and that's such a vital combination. You know what I'm saying? If you don't dream or you don't want for more, it's really hard to move forward. But here's the thing. I mean, the dreaming and the wanting for more many times starts in the brain and the heart. And sometimes it's hard to get the brain moving, especially when you're like, life is crappy. Life is hard. Life is always beating me up and kicking me when I'm down. It's not even worth it some days, it seems like. So it's hard to get your brain moving. But I'm like, okay, so now look at a prize fighter. When they're walking to that boxing ring, do they just stand there and look at their opponent and say, I want to beat this guy? Or are they starting to like hop around? Are they hopping around in the ring? When the brain can get the body moving, but when it's refusing that work, the body can get the brain moving. So I'm like, there were times before I walked into my special ed classes in the inner city with the behavior children that I was in the bathroom throwing a little water in my face, hopping around like a prize fighter. Go, come on, Dad, you got this, Dad. And then boom, I walk in the classroom. Hey guys, let's go. We're gonna get this going today. And they were just like, holy cow, this is like the greatest teacher I ever had. Like, so inspirational. Saying it was just, and it just worked. And I was that way on the wrestling mat as a coach. And on the
It's priming your mind and your body.
yes.
And that's why I love listening to you speak, because you've got this like effervescence about you, right? And you also at one point I heard you say something like, a lot of people say I talk with a Boston accent, and I don't know where that came from, but like, you love to speak. And once you learned how to speak and you could hear, you said you just kept speaking.
I did. And my wife says I speak a little too much. Evidence is from my hoarse voice that I have. But the thing is, I guess a little boy who couldn't talk and couldn't hear, to make it to where I am today, a lot of that came through speaking. A lot of it came through using my body physically and doing. And when you start to do and you start to move along, you start to see things that you didn't see before. And people come into your life who would have never come into your life if you weren't doing something. I think the great Eleanor Roosevelt said, something along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing here, but something like, for Christ's sakes, do something. Do something.
Do something.
That's what the wheels.
Yes, absolutely. Do something. And you know what? Sometimes you have to do it alone. So I want to hear the story. When you decided to try out for the Junior Olympian team, tell me that story. You didn't have people that were coming along with you, right?
No. I remember I wanted to go to the Junior Olympian trials to make the team. And I tried to get people to go with me. I asked all my teammates, I'm like, let's just go. Every one of them had pretty much the same answer. Why the heck would we go to that to get our butts kicked? And I'm just like, well, we'll learn. We're going to get our butts kicked and we'll learn. It will be great. We'll get better because of it. And I guess none of them want to learn that way. So many of them told me not to go. Don't do it. We're just going to get our butts kicked. I'm not going with you, Dan. Don't do it. And they all meant well. They did. But I went there alone, knowing I was going to get my butt kicked, but I was going to learn and be better for it. And then the following season, I'd be tougher and have a better year. What I did not expect was what happened. When I got there, I looked around and there was nobody there I knew and nobody knew me. And for the first time in my life, I did not feel like there was anybody there to judge me, anybody to say anything later on. And for some reason, that thing of nobody judging you, nobody knowing who you are, nobody expecting anything from you, the fear just went right away. And for the first time, I stepped on that mat fearless with nothing to lose. And I pretty much annihilated every kid I wrestled in a place I didn't even have any business being there. And I annihilated. They were coming up to me after saying, where did you come from? Where did you come from? You just beat the heck out of me. Where the heck did you come from? Thinking I came from one of those powerhouse states and I just moved in last week. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, no, I've been here all along. So, I mean, sometimes you got to go and just do it alone and throw fear out the window.
And
And
you believed
so,
in yourself enough to go there alone because you had a dream and then you did something about it. And so whether you are wanting to, do something physically or do something spiritually or do something professionally, which brings me into, I just love the fact that you have changed your whole life around by believing in yourself and by taking the actions and the steps. And you are now the president of the National Speakers Association Connecticut chapter, where you are getting up and giving speeches all the time, and you are encouraging other people to do the same. And so that's really that's dreams in action. So what would you say to people that are like, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be a professional speaker, but you don't have to be a professional speaker, but learning the skill of speaking and everything that comes along with it, has that helped you?
oh, it's tremendous. I mean, the journey I have from a little boy that couldn't talk to a boy that's now president of NSA Connecticut chapter. It's just an unbelievable journey. And and I always tell people, I'm like, listen, I'm like, Toastmasters, National Speaking Association, give you opportunities to get in front of people and speak. And I go, and it makes you a better person. It gives you confidence. It builds leadership. It builds relationships. It builds all sorts of skills,
Mhm.
self-esteem. It makes you a better worker, a better employee, a better person, a better communicator. And it does all these things. And it's funny, Pat, you brought it up because my old buddy, Kenny, I bumped into him in the gym the other day. And he's like, Dan, how's the speaking stuff going? I'm going, the speaking stuff's going awesome. He goes, you love that stuff, don't you? And I said, Kenny, remember when we used to play football and our heart was pounding before that first hit? And I go, but we became better men for taking that first hit and going on and playing football and doing all, we became better men. He's like, yeah, I go, speaking's like that. It's like that, that pounding before the first hit. And then
Yeah.
you open your mouth on that stage or in that room and you speak and you become a better person for it. You make a difference. I mean, just recently, I got asked to speak at one of my coworkers' retirement party.
Mhm.
And when I got done, people were coming up to me for like the next week saying, oh my gosh, that was such a great story about your friend Brian. That was a great. So, I mean, good for him. I shared some really cool stuff about Brian. People saw him in a pretty cool light. You know what I'm saying? So I did something good for Brian, but I inadvertently or indirectly also did something good for me by
Mhm.
being that person to deliver that message.
Yeah, I love that. And storytelling cannot be underrated, and just being in the presence of other people who are sharing a little bit of their soul, a little bit of their heart, it makes a difference. And you automatically feel more connected to somebody when someone can get up there and start speaking about anything and maybe even open themselves up a little bit and share some of their heart and their authenticity. There's an immediate connection. And then that connection builds from there. So there's so many benefits of learning the skill of speaking. So, and by the way, we do have a meeting coming up, right? It's September 12th, and you
Yes.
go to nsact.org to register, and guests are welcome to come. And it's a community, but
Mm.
and it's a community if you want to do something and believe in yourself, but you need to be around the right people that have been on sort of the same journey of like starting from down here. It's a great place to go and to network and to meet people. So Dan, you've written 40 books, you have 5 children, you're a special ed teacher, you've been on the TEDx stage. What's next for you? Now you're president of the National Speakers Association Connecticut chapter. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, I've had quite a journey, and I've had so many cool things in my life. So, and most of the time, I don't even know what's next. I just keep working, and as I keep working and keep doing, doors open. But
Mhm.
one of the things I'm definitely going to do that's just very, very obvious to me is the next year in the National Speakers Association, we've got a great lineup of speakers coming in, and and I have a great story, but so do they. And think about who are the 5 people you're spending your time with. Those
Mhm.
people mold you and shape you and direct you, and broaden your dreams, your bigger dreams. So I just love it that the speakers that we're bringing in have stories like mine and better. So when I get to spend time with them and get to develop relationships with them and get to be friends with them and maybe pick their brains with via emails or phone calls over the next, like, let's say 20 years, because I developed this relationship. So again, I mean, who are you around? What 5 people are you around? Who are you surrounding yourself with? Who are you talking to? Who are you sharing time to? Who can you call or email? And when you're in a place like the National Speakers Association, there's an abundance of those types of people. So with those types of people, I'm sure my dreams are just going to continue to get bigger, and my doing is just going to keep on doing that.
Oh, keep on doing. Well, we are looking forward to, and we're a great group of people. We're a fun group of people, and just like naturally nice, warm group of people. So I hope that we can grow our tribe over the next year. And Dan, I thank you so much for sharing your very important story, the things that you have overcome. I can't even wait to hear what's next, because you continue to totally inspire me and everyone around you. So thanks for sharing your story today. And we will see you September 12th at the Elm Club in New Haven.
I'm looking forward to it, Pat.
All right. Cheers. And, just remember, if you have a dream, you got to start taking the steps to do that dream, right? So I hope today's interview has encouraged you to just inch forward to that dream. Do